Now we're going to actually install some of the moldings. But before we do that, I think it'd be an excellent time to go and look at some of the 3D drawings that Greg did. Again, for those of you in the build that haven't acquired this very useful tool, I can't stress enough that it's not an expensive purchase, but it explains so much more by visually seeing the various parts of the model. You remember I made up a series of moldings, and here they are. And in the case of the drift molding, I put the groove on both sides of the blank piece. And so now I'm going to measure it. And what I'm looking for is 0.0833, and that's exactly what I get here. Failing that, as was the case with this piece, which wasn't exactly that amount, when I put it on, it was 0.09. And so what I did is I went on to the gym bonds and thinned it down to the correct size. And to do that, I looked at both sides and found it was a little thicker on one side than the other. So I split it in half so that I would take down the thicker side, and that'll give me a nice even piece. The little groove on either side is exactly the same. I still have the old Preac thickness sander, and I take the top off because I find it very useful, and I'm doing different thicknesses. I like to put this one in because I can get my fingers fairly close to the sander and get a nice clean cut. This is very gentle on the piece. And you can see these are very thin. They went through very easily, and these are very delicate pieces and no damage to the piece at all. So before we can stick anything, the first thing we need to do is to put the wipe-on poly. So we've shaken it, and we're going to put 2 coats on. Again, being very careful not to get any onto the back side that we're going to stick. The time has come to stick the first piece. So again, just lining it up. And we want to make sure this edge is clean and square so that when we cut this piece to fit on, they line up perfectly and we get a nice square joint on a square joint. So just to apply the glue. Again, I wouldn't put a lot of glue on it, just enough so we don't have any residual coming out on the colors. That can be cleaned up with a paintbrush with some water on it. So I like to just make sure I get the front of it secured with a clamp, and that this is absolutely level. So that'll stay there for 20 minutes. Then we'll fit this piece and then come back and fit the longer piece. Now we're going to install the piece with the bend in it, and we've pre-cut it and cleaned up the connection piece on both ends, both on the front end and the back end, because we have to make sure that when we come to stick the longer piece that we get a nice clean fit. A small amount of glue, less is better. Again, the same cleanup is possible, but this doesn't require a lot of glue on it. It's just holding it in place. At a later point in time, we're going to put a few strategic wooden dowels in it that will disappear in the center of the groove and hold it in place. On the back of it, I should have cleaned off some of the acrylic paint between the red and the blue. So I'm going to open that up with a file so I get a good adhesion. You'll also know that these two moldings come flat at the stern, so in fact we can run them straight out, and then when we clean up the stern they'll just cut off clean, neat, in line with the stern itself. You'll notice in the picture there are 5 swivel mounts that go right through the rail. I am not cutting these at this point in time. I'll simply cut them with a chisel later on, and I'll scrape the paint off so that I get good adhesion when I put the mounts on. So again, the spacers work perfectly. Now we're going to make the shear rail or shear molding. So I went and took my stock out, put the caliper on it, and surprise, surprise, it's a bit overscale. Fortunately for me, the small cutting disc has arrived, and I'm going to use that to make up a new scraper. And I've already broken one. It comes in a pack of 25, so that was a relief. I thought one time I was paying, I believe it was 15 US. By the time it arrived in Trinidad, it was 50 US. And I thought I was paying 50 US for one. It turns out I'm paying that for 25, so $2 for each one. I'm going to treat it with respect. Anyway, these were way oversized, so I remade the scraper, and I mean, just so easy. Scale is so easy, and it was extremely easy to cut it. In fact, it was almost too thin, which means that somewhere around the road I'm going to actually get a cutting blade that's a little bit bigger than that one, because they don't like to go sideways, and when you're cutting down a very thin blade, to make it fatter, you need to make it fatter on both sides. And when I put the bigger piece on it, it was just too fat. So, having done that, I've made it up, and now I'm going to just make up some more on the workbench. And we're always learning new tricks. So I had a lot of trouble trying to put this piece in to do both sides. Try to fit it in. This side goes down too low. And then light bulb goes out and says you just take two little clamps, get it to the pot you want, drop it in, tighten it up, and it's exactly at the right height. And always learning better ways to do things. We want to put the wipe-on poly beforehand, and then to make sure that none of the poly gets on the surface that we want to stick. Before I trim it down to the 4-inch size, I'm putting it on so there's no chance of any of this getting on to the surface we're going to stick. So it's just an easy way of doing it. You'll also know that I made 6 pieces, and we're not going to need a lot of that. And the reason for that is simple. These things don't come out perfect every time. In addition to which, we're going to be cutting up lots of pieces. So as much as I'd like to tell you these all came out perfectly, they don't and they didn't. Now we've got all the molding done. I still find that having cut it on the Jim Barnes table saw, it is too thick. It needs to be reduced significantly. It's actually only 2.5 inches high off the model. And when I try to put it through the saw, the piece crumbles, it falls apart. So I sat down a little while and thought about how I might do that. And then the solution was actually quite simple. Took a piece of mahogany that's absolutely straight and flat, cut a groove on it. I fit the molding, the over-thick molding, into the piece, and now I can put it in the Jim Barnes sander and gently take it down until it's 2.5 inches. And that is the perfect size. So there's just no way I could have done that on the machine. And although you don't see it when you put the oversized piece, it's literally half the size. Of course, as we put it on the boat, I suddenly realized that unlike the first molding, this one is going to be cut up many times because of the channels which fit in the exact same space as this particular molding. We have the fore channel, the main channel, the mizzen channel, and the stool. So that immediately says that go ahead and make up all the moldings, but I need to make the channels. So off to the printer, made up the templates, and we're going to cut those out now. Now we're going to put a taper in the piece, and you've seen me do this before. So all we do is we add on a piece, the thickness of the taper, and then run it through the thickness sander, and that'll take us from 4 inches on this side to 2.5 on this side. it can be very difficult to see what you're sanding, so it's good to put a pencil line. And again, it shows you here's the piece that we've added, and so when we pass it through, you can see what is being cut out. You see that, so you just go up a little bit more. So the first thing we've done is we're preparing to put the molding in, and the molding here goes just under the physical scroll and tight up here, so the other one will come down on it, and we just stick that now. And then you need to fit the piece onto the model, and of course the template isn't going to give you an exact fit. So the way I do that is I put it on, and then I put a light underneath it shining up, and just like we've joined boards in the past where we use light between the two boards to determine where to sand, you'll have to do the same thing here. Once that's complete, you need to make up what David refers to as a standard, but we more commonly know it as a knee. It's just that this knee is facing up. And to do this, there's a template in the book, but you're going to find that the angle here is going to be different from the one in the book. So again, you need to take the angle off the model and then make up a bulk piece and then cut it out. I suggest you make lots of these because we most probably will break some, and you will have to adjust them to make sure that they fit just short of the edge. This edge I've cut clean, and I'm going to put a solid piece on it. It's just simply too hard to cut these individual holes and to cut the end square here. Now we've put 3 pins on a piece, and we can fit them in. Again, spend a lot of time lining up these holes perfectly because it's a curve. And then we just put this trial piece in. This is actually in the wrong place. This one will be cut down flush with the rail, and we have a slight adjustment on the front of it, but it actually goes here, 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 and here. So I'll have to fill that in. Errors, errors, errors. And I had made an error here. I had this piece all the way over here. I was mixing up the bow and the stern, so I've straightened that back out and moved the piece and corrected everything. And of course we're going to paint this gray black. So in a sense it doesn't matter what happens on top here. It's all going to disappear if we have any joinery. And we will put a very thin piece on this at some point. Not necessarily going to put it right now, which will finish off the piece. We've reached the maximum 20-minute limit that I set for myself on these videos. So we'll continue this in the next video, finishing up the side, and then of course do the same thing on the other side. So we see you in the next video, and remember, keep modeling.